And we're live.
Well, thank you, Jess. Good evening. This is Wanda Watts, and I am the community liaison for the Baltimore City Consent Decree Monitoring Team. And we're welcoming you to our quarterly forum. And we have our sponsors tonight are Kareem Amin, we have Mohammed, and we also have Sean Stinnett. And I'm going to introduce Ken Thompson, who is our lead monitor for the monitoring team. And he's going to take it from here and introduce you to the panelists.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. Since this is one of our quarterly forums, we generally have, in addition to the standard group, which would typically be Seth Rosenthal and Chuck Ramsey and I, we are really pleased to have with us tonight a number of our subject matter experts. And these are folks, ladies and gentlemen, who quite frankly, I think are some of the best in the country. I think they add a tremendous amount to this team. And so I want to have you have an opportunity to hear from them this evening. What I would like to do is we'll try to keep our comments, I won't say short, but certainly we'll try to be judicious, because I want to leave as much time as possible for those of you in the audience to ask questions. So without any further ado, let me first introduce you to Hassan Aden. He's the deputy monitor, and he's also, he's in the area. His subject matter expertise is in the area of misconduct and discipline. And that has to do with how you handle police officers who cross the line, either violate the law or violate policy. So without any further ado, Hassan, let me introduce you and you take the floor.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the last quarter with regard to misconduct and discipline. What we've primarily worked on, actually, let me set the stage for this. Over the last 2.5 years, we've been working on an investigator's procedural manual. And based on that procedural manual, training that went to every internal affairs investigator. And part of that goes all the way back to the DOJ, their finding letter. And their finding letter found that accountability was an area that was most concerning. It's the area that has the most paragraphs in the consent decree out of any other topic. And it's the area where, communities, it's one of the areas where communities can very quickly lose trust in the police based on their performance. And so what we learned when we started getting into the department was that there was no formal training and that there was no formal procedural manual. So the expectations were very low, and predictably, the internal affairs function, I wouldn't even say it functioned in a dysfunctional way. It didn't function at all. It was a broken system and greatly contributed to getting the Baltimore Police Department in a situation where they found themselves with a Civil Rights Division investigation and subsequently a consent decree. So we spent a long time building the investigator's procedural manual, which quite frankly, in collaboration with the US Department of Justice, our experts, and the city of Baltimore's new leadership, we were able to build a manual that is not only efficient, effective, and really builds trust in the investigations, but it's one of the best ones in the country. I work on consent decree teams in Chicago, Cleveland, and I've worked on a team for a long time in Seattle. And I can tell you that this manual, people are coming from other cities to take a look at it and to see how it was built out. Tightly tied to the manual. You can have the greatest manual, but if you don't train people to it, they're gonna pick and choose areas that they want. We trained for months. The city got an outside trainer. We developed the training with that outside trainer, and it was delivered in April and May of 2021. Closely following that, after several months, because we wanted to get some cases based on the manual and based on the training, we're at a point now where we've almost completed an assessment of a sampling of cases. And we're going to be putting that report out probably end of May. And I can preview that there's some vast improvement in the same exact assessment that we did in 2018, and then post-manual, post-training in 2022, actually late 2021 and the first quarter of 2022. And this inspires a lot of confidence in terms of the investigators and the work that they're doing, because having them trained and having them follow procedures results in better investigations, and investigations where all of the evidence is looked at and they can make a sound determination as to the recommendations to command and subsequently either the discipline or criminal prosecution or not. But it's not like before where no one had trust in the outcomes of these investigations. We also have been, we've had a keen eye on staffing, because if staffing is low, like it has historically been, and historically people from internal affairs were pulled to different areas, or they were pulled out of their job and put into high crime areas, and then they were not doing the important work of investigations. And what happens when an investigator gets overloaded by cases as they continue to pile up, they spend less and less time on the case because they're just trying to get through them. And that's unfair to the complainants. It's unfair to the public. It's unfair to the community. And it's unfair to them to actually put them in a position where they're not trained. They're not, they don't have a guidebook to follow. And ultimately, it's just a recipe for disaster, which we saw. So let me go back to staffing. Staffing has increased by 27% in the last year, April to April. And they now have 38 detectives that are fully functional. And again, as I stated, based on our latest review, which isn't fully completed yet, things are looking extremely better. So more on that when we file. We're also navigating, and I know I'm taking a lot of time. There's a lot has gone on in the last year. But we're also navigating the new legislation that governs Maryland statewide police reform. And we've worked on a lot of policies, we've collaborated on them. One policy in particular is the discipline matrix. The state legislation mandated that a matrix be created for all police departments. The matrix that the state chose is 99% based on the one that we developed in Baltimore City. It is clear, it's effective, and it offers clear guidelines for how chiefs of police and sheriffs need to consider outcomes in investigations and how to give discipline, how to impose discipline. So I'll leave it there, Ken. I think that's a snapshot with a little historic behind it.
Thank you, Hassan. That's very helpful. And again, I want to remind folks, those of you who can, please attend the public hearing, which takes place this Thursday, the 21st, begins at 10 o'clock, and it's on Zoom. And I'm certain Wanda will make sure everyone has the Zoom link before we leave the channel this afternoon. What I'd like to do next, because I'm certain folks are writing down their questions, let me get the discussions out of the way first. So let me ask Taz Villasenor to talk a little bit about use of force and interaction with youth, police interaction with youth. So I'll turn it over to you, Taz.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And use of force obviously is a very significant issue for the situation in Baltimore and for the Baltimore Police Department. As you know, a lot of the complaints that Hassan were talking about, quite often some of them focused around use of force or accusations of excessive force. So this was one of the topics that we hit head on right from the beginning of the consent decree. And in conjunction with the Department of Justice, BPD, and then outside input and community input, we rewrote their entire use of force set of policies. And it's not just one policy, but you had the general use of force policy, and then you had policies that dealt with de-escalation, which was relatively a new topic in policing when we started this in 2015, 2016, excuse me, and 2017 and 18. And we kept writing on firearms, canine use, less lethal weapons, batons, CEW, OC spray, and all the different policies they had that dealt with use of force. And we make sure that they were in line with best practices across the country. Those were enacted in, I believe, 2018, or excuse me, 2019, November 2019, and they went live. And what we wanted to do was to set the guidelines with those policies of how officers should conduct themselves, how force should be applied, but also emphasizing the importance of life and also the need for de-escalation in these situations. So those policies had to go through training for the entire department, and that was conducted in 2018, 2019 before the policies going live in 2019, because every officer had to be trained on the policies before they could go live. Since that time, we have seen continued decreases in use of force year over year since the new policies have been put in place. What we've concentrated on now in the past 2 years is the review and the assessment of use of force incidents. With conferring with DOJ and the city, we felt that for a representative sample to be significant to say that our evaluation process was accurate, we had to do close to 555 cases where we would go in and we would review the entire use of force incident. We would look at body-worn camera. We would look at how the supervisors reviewed these use of force events, and we would see how things were categorized and how, if any, accountability, such as Assad was talking about, was put in place. At this point now, we have completed about 450 of those 550 cases, and we're getting a good understanding and feeling about use of force and how it's being conducted. I've been very deeply involved with that process, along with Chief Ramsey, who's on the call also. And I will tell you myself that I can see a difference from the beginning years, because we started going back to 2018 through 2021. And I see a significant difference in the use of force, the investigation and evaluation of use of force, and the implementation of the new policies as we get closer to the present time. I'm seeing that officers where in the beginning, I don't think there was a clear understanding of de-escalation, how it worked, the guidelines in which force could be applied. I see that there is a much greater understanding now. Also, with the department putting on the EPIC training, which talks about intervention and talking about the responsibility for officers to also get involved if they see something that's inappropriate, to step in. We've seen instances of that occurring. So overall, I'm encouraged by the improvements that we're seeing in use of force, and we're going to continue to get these initial sets of evaluations and audits completed, and then continue on with the ongoing assessments of the use of force. When we look at these audits, we are also, I think we've had 5 or maybe 6 meetings with the Department of Justice and BPD to discuss cases where we felt that it just didn't land right. Either the assessment was not thorough enough, or something was missed, or the actual act itself there were problems with. Those discussions have been very frank, and I think I'm very encouraged by the fact that BPD has taken them to heart, and they're also agreed on a lot of these cases that, you know, this could have been done better, or that could have been done better, or the evaluation process could have caught something here. So it's a huge endeavor to try and change how a department uses force, to understand the new best practices that are out there across the country and to implement them within the organization. But I think that BPD has put forth a tremendous effort, and DOJ has provided guidance, and we as the monitoring team are doing a very thorough job at looking at all the use of force incidents and making sure that we are getting BPD to come in line with what the best practice and what the new policies dictate.
So Taz, thank you on that. Can you talk a little bit, since you talked about de-escalation, can you talk just a little bit about the police interaction with youth?
Sure. That's another area, significant area that we have been working on. And Dr. DuPont, who's on the line, has been working with me on that because BPD is doing something quite unique. And I think they, again, are going to be leaders across the country in this. They're looking at their interactions with youth from the aspect also of the, and doctor, if I step out of line here, please, you tell me. But human beings develop at different levels than what we've understood before. And the latest science is showing that about to the age 25 or so, that the human brain is not fully matured. And parts of that maturity involve judgment and decision-making. So of course, when you're dealing with 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds up to 25-year-old, you're going to have actions that sometimes just aren't going to be what you would expect out of an adult individual that you interact with. And so what we're trying to get across to officers, this development process, how it affects youth behavior and how they interact with adults, whereas a tactic you might use with an adult may have a completely different reaction when you do that with a youth. And so we try to encourage that through scenario, through educational. We did a 2-day training episode right here that we're sending all the officers. Now we just completed the pilots last month, and now we're on live training where every officer in the department is going to go through 16 hours of training to learn about these developmental issues, to learn about the 2 new youth policies. One is interrogation of youth and one is interaction with youth, and how we want to have the officers recognize this, interact with youth, and try and develop a communication process that is much more successful at getting compliance. And also, maybe they don't need a criminal action on this. Maybe they need help. Maybe they need some type of prevention. So we're looking at things along with the mayor's office on the youth diversion program. We're piloting a program called Sidestep in one of the divisions where we're going to do pre-arrest diversion, where the officers on certain crimes that they will qualify for, the officers will be able to get them into diversion rather than a criminal arrest. Because once you get them in criminal arrest, studies have shown that that can set them down the wrong path as well. Whereas if you provide assistance and diversion and get them maybe some of the help, social services, counseling, whatever they may need to address the underlying issues that's causing the behavior, then that would be a better outcome. Randy, am I missing things? Or I'm sure you can expand on that much better than I can.
Oh, good job, Ted. Appreciate it.
I'm not sure Randy's on. And if he's not,
Are you not hearing me?
oh, okay, we hear you. Okay.
My apologies. No, I said, good job, Taz. I thought he captured it nicely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Taz. Thank you, Randy. Let's move to Nola. Nola Joyce. Nola, you're going to talk a little bit about performance evaluations. Before you get into that, can you kind of describe for all of us who are listening to today or tonight or this evening exactly what you mean by performance evaluations?
Sure, thank you, and welcome everybody. Thank you for spending your evening with us. We appreciate it. So performance evaluations, and probably most of you have gone through a performance evaluation, but the formal piece of it is at least an annual sit down with your boss about how well you did your job over the course of a year. And performance evaluation systems can be very poor. And by that, I mean, it's just a check a box and said, hi, I'm glad we talked. I'll see you next year. To very thorough, in which very specific areas are identified for performance, and examples and scoring is set. So the supervisor can assess how well a employee is actually doing the work required by them. And so when it comes to policing, what is true in the general public is true in policing. There are poor systems and there are better systems, and there are poor supervisors and there are better supervisors. And the performance evaluation system, the new one here in Baltimore, was activated just this year, January 1st of 2022. And it requires that every member of the police department, from a sworn officer to a deputy commissioner, will have their performance evaluated by their immediate boss. The monitoring team, the Department of Justice, and the police department started work on developing this new system in late 2017. Now, that may sound like a long time, and it is a long time, but part of it was not only was the system, and I'll describe what I mean by that in just a minute, had to be developed, but also the work you just heard about and other work like it had to be done. So new policies had to be set, new training had to be delivered so that a new level of performance and expectations can be established. And officers and supervisors have been trained in how to meet those expectations and performance levels. And it's only until after that can you put in a performance evaluation system to assess how well those behaviors are actually occurring. So before I go into what this new system looks like, just prior to 2022, I would say that the Baltimore Police Department's performance evaluation system was basically pro forma. The boxes are checked. There may be a conversation between a supervisor and a subordinate. And like I said, you know, hands may have been shook, and I'll see you next year if you work for me. But really the behaviors and the attributes that were reviewed prior to this year had minimal tie to the values, the goals, and the mission of the police department. In some cases, an employee may not even had a performance evaluation completed by their supervisors. Officers working outside of their primary unit for 90 days or more would not have had that work reflected on their performance evaluation. And oftentimes the first time an employee would see their evaluation is when they sat down with their supervisor to go over it. The new system addresses all of that. And it consists of a revised policy, forms, manuals, and training. Policy 1708 is the guideline for performance evaluations, and it sets the procedures necessary to, quote, ensure the fair, impartial, and accurate evaluation of employee performance, and that every sworn member, as I said, will receive an annual performance evaluation. It really is a modern approach to evaluating the police department members' performance. Let me just give you a few examples. There are different evaluation criteria for officers, sergeants and lieutenants, and captains and above. So for example, the job competencies for officers and sergeants would include, among other things, accountability, collaboration, customer focus, problem solving. For the supervisors, it includes building effective teams and demonstrating managerial courage. Now, those are kind of big concepts, and what the performance manual does is take those competencies and provides very specific examples of what it looks like for someone to perform excellent problem solving and someone who performs less than satisfactory problem solving and everything in between. So the supervisor can, look at the behavior that he's documented over the course of the year in problem solving of his officer and say, you really fall into the satisfactory level. And here's what you can do to improve your performance level here. But in addition to competencies, the new system also has very specific performance areas that officers, sergeants, and lieutenants are going to be judged on. And these include things like community policing, de-escalation and the use of force, crisis management, communication skills, decision-making skills, integrity, demonstrated commitment to fair and impartial policing. And again, and then there's also workplace professionalism, such as teamwork and cooperation, initiative, leadership, and professionalism. Again, these are big concepts. The manual takes each concept and describes what it looks like in action. And finally, for supervisors, the skills that are being looked for are things like being able to conduct force investigation reviews, to address misconduct and performance problems, to provide feedback and employee performance reviews, and to recognize training opportunities and support the growth of their subordinates. Now, all of those concepts are measured across, like I said, a 5-item scale ranging from exceptional to unsatisfactory. And the manual helps the supervisor assess the performance of their subordinates by giving examples and how to avoid common errors when doing performance evaluation. And all that paperwork, all that writing is good. But really what's essential, I think, is training. And there was an initial training on the new system using e-learning toward the end of 2021. Just this week, a 4-day training of supervisors is going to be piloted. This supervisory training will cover things like how to provide effective feedback to subordinates, how to coach and mentor and address misconduct and professional problems. And really, performance evaluation is not what happens at the end of the year, the form that's filled out and submitted to human resources. Performance evaluation, to be good, happens every day. And so the training really focuses the supervisor on how to be a good supervisor and what that means when working with subordinates. And this is the approach of the new system. Supervisors who understand how to give corrective feedback, encouragement, and discipline when it's needed will have a higher performing team that's going to provide better police services to Baltimore. At the end of 2022, as I said, every employee will have their performance over the past year judged based on this system.
Thank you very much, Nola. That was very helpful and I think very comprehensive. There are 2 other members of the team that you haven't heard from. You just heard from Randy DuPont, who gave you a cameo appearance for about 2 seconds. But in addition to Randy, we have Chuck Ramsey and we have Seth Rosenthal, both of whom are deputy monitors. Chuck or Seth, you guys have any comments before I turn the meeting over to Kareem, Mohammed, and Sean?
If I could just add just one thing to the use of force comments that Taz made. I'm involved in reviewing these cases as well. And he mentioned that he's seen improvement in the quality of the investigations from 2018 to date. And that's absolutely true. But another area of improvement that could go unnoticed by some is the fact that there's a process called chain of command review, where a completed investigation has to be signed off on by people of higher rank, all the way up to the commander. In some cases, depending on the seriousness of the infraction, it could go as high as the police commissioner himself. But 2020, 2021 in particular, you're starting to see more evidence of people reviewing these cases and actually making corrections, sending it back for more information, doing the kinds of things that they should be doing if they're truly paying attention to what's going on. That I wanted to mention that because that is a very important part of the process, is making sure that those supervisors in this chain of command are actually doing what they should be doing and thoroughly reviewing. There's also a use of force assessment unit that exists now, and they will pick cases and they will go through it and they will evaluate whether or not that process was worked. Did people do the things they should have done? Should corrective action have been taken? I mean, there's a process and checks and balances that you're starting to see now that are in place as part of BPD's effort to totally revise the way in which they conduct these investigations. that is very positive and something that I just wanted to throw out there and mention. The only other thing, Ken, just so people know, the annual report on community policing progress that the department is making, there is a draft. Both the monitoring team and DOJ have made comments on that draft and sent it back to the department. I didn't check my email today, but we had not gotten back the after the comments, any revisions that they made, but things are moving along in that area. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. Anything, Seth, that you want to add before
I have
turn it
not, I have nothing further. No, thanks.
over? Okay, thank you. All right, Kareem, Mohammed, Sean, the show is yours.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say my name and introduce who I am, and then hand it over to Brother Sean to go ahead and kick off the discussion. My name is Kareem Amin. I'm the Executive Director of Voices of 21217. We are a photography and film organization that works with youth. But we're unique in the sense that we are an advocacy organization. We work in conjunction with No Boundaries Youth Organization. We recently were approached by the Department of Justice and No Boundaries to create a visual that included youth voice. This visual is actually going to be a part of the training for veteran officers. And so we recently revealed that visual last weekend at the No Boundaries Youth event. I know my Wanda was there and saw that, and it was a really incredible piece because I think it really provided an honest voice. I was very surprised in the beginning that during the process of training about youth voice was not there. But I also was excited for the opportunity to try to help to fill that void and really hear from a variety of different youth, their opinions, their engagement with officers, and just how they want to continue to work within their community. And they were very mature in just the way that they expressed themselves, and I was very impressed by it. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there and then hand it over to Brother Sean, and then we go ahead into the discussion.
Yes, good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Stinnett. I hold a number of positions in the community capacity, president of Arlington Improvement Association, and also I'm a director of Baltimore Main Streets, which that particular initiative, Baltimore Clean Streets. That initiative that we, I work with some young people, and also even have those young people partner up with the police department. That and really at times that sometimes I don't say who's who as far as that group, as far as I can see what kind of interaction the young people as far as have with the adults that are coming in to our circle. Which is great. I think that we need more, programs like this as far as Clean Streets, because one, it gives these kids the opportunity to kind of clean their area, their environment, as well as and have that positive interaction as far as with police officers and in different capacities and so forth. And I think that sometimes, a lot of the kids that I've encountered has negative opinions towards police, however, has never had an actual interaction with police. And of course, it's just because of the environment that they've grown up in to have that had that negative reaction. But to me, it gives them an opportunity to kind of, hey, let's step away as far as what you see as far as within the uniform and actually see what the individual is all about and what type. And that kind of builds, sort of the their morale, at least their opinion about police officers, which is great, because that gives them an opportunity to kind of see the other side and see that, they are human, they're just like you. They just, put on the uniform for the job itself. And then, they kind of, approach, them a lot differently, as well as, even puts the police officers in a different, mindset and a capacity, which is great. So, thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm looking in the chat, and we have a couple of questions that are in the chat that I know we want to try to address. So I see two, and please forgive me if I say your name wrong, from an Alvonia Allen. And this is for the panel. with so many incidents involving the GTTF, that's the Gun Trace Task Force, for those that don't know that's on the live, what does the monitoring team with BPD hope to do or counteract this in the future?
Chuck, you want to take a shot at that?
Well, I think it's important to know that the monitoring team is not doing any investigation into that area, but clearly the new policies and procedures that we've discussed that are being put in place go a long way from preventing that kind of misconduct from occurring in the future. Clearly, there was no supervision or very little, very lax supervision that took place there at different levels to allow something like that to fester for as long as it did. So supervision is key, is essential. That's one of the areas that the consent decree does focus on, obviously. And I also think that the fact that these individuals faced criminal charges and stiff penalties, again, these are deterrents. The community deserves a lot more than what they got in that very dark episode in the history of Baltimore. There's no question about that. But part of our job and part of what we do as a monitoring team in putting in place these policies, procedures, training, accountability, all those kinds of things should definitely lessen any chance of something like that happening again in the future. So if anybody wants to add anything to that, please.
I'll
Yes,
add something. Yeah, I just to piggyback on what Chuck said, there are a lot of things in motion based on the investigation and prosecutions, but also based on the latest report that was written by Michael Bromwich, who really peeled a lot of layers back on what happened and how it was allowed to happen. And what we found was that all of the things that occurred were tied to something that is directly overseen by the consent decree. As a result, Michael Bromwich basically gave a multitude of recommendations. The BPD and the city accepted all of them. And what we are monitoring is their progress in how they are implementing fixes to all of the recommendations. So there's some activity and there's some tracking on how the BPD is doing in this regard with the aftermath of the GTTF.
Mr. Hassan, while I still have you there, could you comment on maybe one or two of those recommendations that you felt that stood out, especially as it relates to this team, to the monitoring team?
Absolutely. Part of it, I mean, a bunch of recommendations are around supervision. That was the biggest enabler, supervision and accountability. And then they flow from there. But things, I mean, there were, again, numerous recommendations that focused on how people were transferred, focused how commanders were able to get people into their units, that they favored without fair processes. It just was a pretty entangled web of dysfunction. But those are two big ones, and Chuck addressed them. And it's not like a single topic under supervision or a single topic under accountability. There are multitudes of issues under both of those. Those are the two biggest buckets, though.
And if I could just jump in quickly, just around the supervision piece, I mentioned that training, general supervisory training will start this month, actually. And every supervisor in the police department will go through this 4-day training. And a lot of the training itself pulled from the report to ensure that those shortfalls that were identified are addressed. And supervisors understand not only what their responsibilities are, but how to do that job better, whether it's accountability, oversight, or to investigate and discipline. And on the positive side, reward and acknowledge good work when it happens. So I think, as already has been said, the department is starting to work through some of those issues as they should have. And part of that is the training that's starting this month.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other comments before we move on to the next question?
I'd like to jump in for a second. Ken, are you able to talk about technology and the lack of with the Baltimore City Police Department and
Well,
how that is going to turn things around?
I can real briefly, and maybe I'll turn it over to Seth, since he's going to be talking a little bit about it on Thursday. So Seth, you want to take that one?
Sure. Look, one of the big problems that the Justice Department investigation found, and it's a problem that was confirmed in the Gun Trace Task Force investigation as well by Mr. Bromwich, is that Baltimore police officers were engaged in a pattern or practice of stopping and searching people without legal justification, and stopping and searching people of color in particular. So that's a focus of ours under the consent decree. The problem that we've had, and the problem that the police department itself has had, is that its technology, its IT systems, its technology was so outdated when we first began our work in 2018 that there was no way that we could look at data on stops and searches in an aggregate way so that we could get a good understanding of where BPD was at that point in the consent decree process and whether it would be making improvements over time. So one of the first things that the consent decree required BPD to do and the city to do was to basically scrap its old paper-based reporting system, right? I mean, officers until just last summer were still writing out reports by hand, giving carbon copies to people that they were stopping or searching or arresting, and then giving other carbon copies back to the department to process, through records management. It was, again, sort of something that harkened back to the 20th century, and probably not the end of the 20th century either. What BPD has done in the last couple of years is solicited proposals for, approved proposals for, and now adopted and implemented a brand new record management system where officers are no longer filling out paper reports, but they're actually filling out reports on laptop computers in the field, which is much more convenient and less cumbersome for officers, number one. And number two, because all of this information is now being fed into a relational database, it's easier for BPD as a department and easier for us as a monitoring team to look at data on stops and data on searches in an aggregate way to determine whether the provisions of the consent decree and the Constitution are being complied with. That's where we are in the process right now. We are still beta testing the new technology, meaning that we're still trying to look at the data to determine whether officers are comprehensively reporting their stops and searches in the way they need to, so that BPD internally and we externally can monitor what's taking place and to ensure that officers are following policy, following the consent decree, and following the Constitution. There are some kinks, as you might imagine there to be kinks in a process that's this comprehensive, but BPD is making substantial progress in gathering the type of data using the new technology that the consent decree requires.
Real quick, Seth, if I may ask, in terms of time, I know I've heard a lot of community people talk about, officers spending a lot of times in their vehicles. They want them to engage, to navigate as far as, excuse me, through different areas. And I know that, of course, going from the current, I guess, status or situation where they're inputting, where the technology is not there, and now having this new system, as far as timing, what kind of time is, I guess, sort of increased that sort of in a positive direction, as far as that now they're filling out that paperwork, spending like what, 20 minutes now, and now it's down to 10 minutes, versus because they want to, the community wants to see these officers navigating through, the certain areas more in less thinking that, of course, the first thing that the community folks going to say, well, they're just, spending time on their phones or whatever, and not realizing that they're actually inputting data into their system of their recent interaction with a certain incident.
Right. It's a really good point, Sean, and one that's worth emphasizing, because one of the ideas behind, developing this new technology and utilizing what's called electronic field-based reporting is that, in fact, it will free officers up more to engage in the type of community policing activity that the consent decree requires and that the commissioner aspires to, because they're going to be spending less time filling out paper reports. They're going to be filling out, before, for just about every incident, they had to fill out two different reports. Now, everything is combined into this one electronic report. There are automatic prompts for things for officers to fill out. There's a narrative section for them to fill out the narrative section, and they can sort of be on their way. It's also easier for supervisors to review reports in this way. So to your point, yes, it should free officers up more to spend more time on the streets engaged in community activities.
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I have some other, thank you for those responses. I have a question from Miss Mary. I'm going to combine her two questions and then ask that the panel take on which ones they prefer. So her first question, will there be consequences for supervisors who do not submit performance reviews for their staff members? That was her first question. Again, consequences for supervisors who do not submit performance reviews for their staff members. And her second question is she's interested in hearing more about the BPD hiring of civilian officers.
So Hassan, why don't you take the first one, and Nola, you take the second.
The performance evaluation system, and this is in NOLA's area, but we all sort of work on this. Absolutely, it's going to be tracked, and each officer is going to be on an annual schedule, and that annual schedule isn't just at the end of the year, a supervisor rushes and does an evaluation. There are check-ins, there are other things that have to occur between the supervisor and the people that they supervise. So absolutely, there are consequences for supervisors who do not complete all of the steps that are involved in supervising someone and completing an annual review.
So,
No.
oh, sorry, Ken.
No, I was calling you, so go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So on the civilian plan that was just released by the police department this week, it is quite, I'd use the word innovative. Phoenix beat them to the punch, but Phoenix and the Baltimore Police Department, I think, are among the early adopters of the idea that there are more positions in a police department that civilians can perform, including the role of investigator. The police department has proposed civilian investigators in criminal investigations, in PIB investigations, background investigations. As you might know, a good deal of investigation begins by a review of existing databases, existing documents, putting together the timeline of the crime, and et cetera, and calling people and getting things set up. It doesn't take an individual with a badge and a gun to do that work. It takes an individual who has an inquiring mind, who has the ability and the skills to really dig deep into understanding what happened and how it happened. And just as I think it was Hassan, yes, it was Hassan talked about the investigative manual. So for anyone who's a civilian going into the PIB investigations, they would be operating under that same manual, and they would get the same training as a sworn investigator. Now, when it comes to having to make an arrest, Obviously, that is the role of a sworn police officer. But that civilian can provide strong backup and help work with detectives to prepare the case file as it moves on to the prosecutor. So it's a way of offloading some work that is being done by sworn, and because of let's be honest, and you guys know this, there's a real challenge of recruiting sworn members, not only into Baltimore Police Department, but the police departments across the country. For example, year to date right now, the first 3 months of this year, Baltimore has had net loss of 44 sworn members. That meaning that 44 more officers left this police department than they were able to hire. And that gap just seems to grow despite the best efforts by the police department. So this civilianization effort is the way to bridge that gap. We know that in order for civilians to function well in a police department, several things have to happen. They have to be selected and they have to be the right fit for the job, just like anyone and everywhere. They have to have the right training and they have to have the right support. When those three things happen, they perform as well, and in some cases, even better than sworn officers in some jobs.
All right, we have about 6 minutes left. We have one more question. I believe that Ms. Nola did touch on certain aspects of this question. So if you could just repeat some things that you said. You're welcome, Mary. I got to thank you for Mary. Is the evaluation performance done in a mid-cycle to provide feedback before the year end? Or is it just a once a year evaluation? I think you did touch on that a little bit. And they wanted to know about improvement plans for officers. And I just wanted to add on one thing. With any aspects of those evaluations, i.e. any officers that have continual civilian complaints, would those evaluations be available to the public in any way, shape, or form?
So first, the first question, this is an annual evaluation. There is not a mid-year. However, in order to do the annual evaluation, and what is stressed is that the supervisor should be keeping a file for each of his subordinates or her subordinates. And as the year progresses, throw, whether it's an electronic file or a paper file, throw in there an example of a good job done, or an example where that officer had to be coached on something, or an example from a body worn camera footage of how something was handled well or how something wasn't handled well. So when that supervisor sits down with his officer, sits down to prepare the performance evaluation, he can pull out those examples from that file. The second question, I'm sorry, what was the second one?
The second question was it was about performance improvement plans.
Yes.
and for officers that may have repeated civilian complaints, will any part of that evaluation be public?
Okay, so performance improvement plans will be required for those officers, or not just officers, but for those members who have been assessed as being less than satisfactory performance. And a performance improvement plan is set down. A performance improvement plan can also happen outside of the annual evaluation and can be generated at any time by a supervisor based on what that supervisor may have been observing early on. In terms of the civilian, in terms of the citizen complaints, I don't know, Hassan, can I kick that one over to you?
Sure. And the answer is going to be that it really depends under the circumstance. Generally, civilian complaints are going to be confidential.
Thank you. So we have about 3 minutes. I wanted to toss it over to Ms. Wanda Watts to see if she had any words that she wanted to share.
Okay. Thank you, Kareem. Thank you, Sean, as well for being with us tonight. I just have a question for Chuck, if he's still with us. The community policing plan is coming out, and there'll be one in each district. And wonder whether or not the community will have an opportunity to have any input.
Well, right now, the monitoring team and DOJ have made their comments. I'm pretty sure, Seth, is this one with this annual plan that goes out for public review, or is it just published?
I think I have to look at the monitoring plan, honestly. I'm not sure. I think this one may go out for public comment
I
beforehand.
think so too.
Because it's not a report, it's actually a plan, right?
Well, the one we just
Well,
reviewed, Chuck.
It is a report.
It is a report.
It is a report. It's not the
It's not
plan.
required. I mean, it's not going to be viewed by the public. I think, Wanda, are you asking about the micro
The
policing?
micro
plan?
policing plans. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, I am.
okay, so that's a little bit different than what Chuck was referring to. And I don't know, Chuck, do you want to talk about
Well,
that?
the
one?
micro plans are going to be done in cooperation and collaboration with the community in that area. And so, yes, that would be something that the community will have some input, because to develop that plan, you have to do it collaborating with the community in that particular neighborhood, in that particular area. It's actually smaller areas than an entire neighborhood, but the focused areas where the plan is being implemented.
So
So,
they
yeah.
should be in touch perhaps with their commanders or the
Yes,
community liaisons to find
Yes.
out how that process is working, so they can be involved.
I think they're piloting it in two areas right now, 2 districts, and working out the bugs. So it'll be a little while before it gets citywide.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us, and I thank our experts for being with us tonight. And anyone can reach us on our email, which is info@bpdmonitor.com. And gentlemen, you all know how to reach me by phone or by email. And I think that's all that we have for tonight. Ken,
Thank you.
do you have one last thing to say?
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy day to listen to us. I mean, this is really, really important stuff. I mean, we are really trying to transform this department into a 21st century constitutional police department. And the only way that's going to happen is we're going to have a tremendous amount of community support, because, it's the folks out in the community who are going to be the ears and eyes of the monitoring team. And when you see good things, you should report it. When you see bad things, you should report it. So, I mean, this is an incredibly important process. I think that the department is well on its way to becoming what we want it to be, but it's going to take really the work of everyone in Baltimore City to make this a success. So again, thank you for listening, and stay tuned and stick with us. Thank you.
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.